Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Brittany, and if you're not, welcome back. You already know what the title of this video is, so that means you already know what we're going to be talking about today. I want to start this video by saying I took notes because I want to make sure I speak eloquently and thoroughly and don't miss any points that I want to make. So yeah. If maybe you follow me on other social medias or even on this YouTube channel, then you might know that I was a talent agent, more specifically the director of a division at a talent agency, and a lot of my content was focused around that. I was really starting to get in the groove here on YouTube, sharing just my knowledge of the industry and my perspective as an agent and what we look for and how talent should what talent should do to be successful. So I had a lot of following because of that. I had a lot of people DMing me, emailing me, asking me how to get started, how to get their children started, what's the best route, what's a good agency, and all these questions. And I used to love to answer them, and I still will answer them occasionally. I just feel like the industry is ever changing, and so since I'm no longer in that space, I might not be the best qualified person to answer those questions anymore. So anyway, without any more jibber jabber, let's go ahead and jump into the video and have a chat. All right, so let's start with a little bit of backstory. If you see me looking down, it's like I said, I took notes because I want to make sure that I am saying everything that needs to be said. So a little bit of backstory on how I even got into the talent agent space, which it was really untraditional. So I am the child of a dancer, model, and was kind of just born into the creative space. I've always loved to create. I did musical theater in high school. I danced all the way through school and loved anything creative. I went on my first tour in high school, and that opened up like a whole new world for me. Just touring the world and seeing different arenas and the stages and the artists on stage it just planted a seed. So I've been immersed in the entertainment industry, specifically pretty much all of my life that I can remember. And if I wasn't in it, I was hearing stories of my mom being in it or people around me. So it's all I've ever really been passionate about. I was born in New York, but moved to the suburban Atlanta area in elementary school and pretty much grew up there. I would spend my summers in New York and New Jersey with my family, and just was always immersed in culture and people and entertainment and music and all the things, and graduated high school, and college wasn't for me. Didn't know what I was gonna do. I just kind of was like blowing in the wind, going wherever, auditioning for little gigs and doing little videos with my friends, dancing and yada yada yada. And so I was 21. I went to New York to visit my grandmother. My grandfather had just passed, and I went to just spend some time with her because she was by herself. And just went for like a week and never came back to Atlanta. I went into the city and met a bunch of, like, my cousin was there interning in the city. I met a bunch of friends. I made so many friends in that 1 week. I was like, I can't leave this place. It's amazing. Like, I was obsessed. I knew I needed to live in New York. And let me tell you something, if you are in your 20s specifically, but at any age thinking about moving to a big city, LA, New York, I don't care where it is, go and do it. I don't care if you have the money. I don't care if you know what you're doing, do it. Because there's just something magical that happens when you move somewhere different that is full of people just like you that are working towards something or have big dreams. And none of us had money, okay? I was so poor. I moved up there. I think I had like 50 cents in my account. I kid you not. So anyway, I moved to New York at 21 and just kind of threw myself into the scene. I worked at everything you can think of. I worked at the W Hotel as a hostess. I worked at a shoe store in Soho. I did any and everything to get money. I did modeling gigs, Brooklyn Fashion Week. I assisted at Fashion Week. I did everything. I ended up working for a restaurant group and helped the owner of the restaurant open several restaurants, and I was like the head maitre d' at these restaurants. I mean, I did it all. I threw myself into it and eventually started teaching dance. I became a professor of dance, which is a whole nother story in itself, at a performing arts college in Long Island. Taught dance at studios throughout Times Square and like just everything. And so I did the whole New York thing for like 4.5, 5 years, and it was the best of times and the worst of times. I wouldn't change it for the world because it shaped me and it made me who I know I am today, and it gave me the work ethic that I know I have today. So it was amazing. Anyway, so I moved back to the Atlanta area once I had my daughter because it just made sense. All my family was here and it's cheaper and it's just easier to get around and figure things out. So eventually made my way back to Atlanta and started teaching dance at a studio in Buckhead, Atlanta. If you know Atlanta, you know Buckhead, and if you don't, you might still know Buckhead because it's terrible now. Anyway, started teaching dance there, and that is how I met my talent agent. I was teaching her daughter dance at this studio, and she was like, "You're so cute, you should let me start submitting you, and your daughter could be working like little gray coat jobs and stuff." And I was like, okay, bet. So boom, now I have my first official talent agent, and it was great. I was teaching dance and I was making like pennies. I think I was making like something like $12,000 a year, and I was on WIC, I was on food stamps, I was on Medicaid. I was just making it by like the skin of my teeth. I don't know how. Borrowing a lot of money. My parents were super helpful, but I was just doing what I had to do. So fast forward a few years, maybe 2-3 years, and I just knew I needed to change my life. Like something had to change, and I was no longer really happy teaching, and I was starting to become like one of those mean dance teachers. And I've had mean dance teachers, and I didn't want to be that. I didn't ever want to like hurt a child's feelings or change the trajectory of their potential dance career because I was that mean teacher. And so I knew, right, that there was something stirring and something that needed to shift. And so by this time, my agent and I had become like good friends. And so we would talk often, and her daughter and I were really close. So there was some interpersonal relationship there. And I had mentioned to her that I just felt like I needed to do something different. And so we got to talking, and long story short, she had a position open. I wanted to fill the position. So I approached her about it, and she was like, "Girl, come on over to the other side." So in 2019, the summer of 2019, I started kind of slowly, basically like interning, shadowing into the agency to become a booker, a talent booker. And that is how it all started. So I didn't have a traditional interview process. I didn't have the traditional, you know, like resume or anything like that. But what I did have was a vast knowledge of the industry because I've been in it for so long. And so to be on the other side was really amazing, and I adapted really easily and really quickly. So that is kind of the backstory of me, how I got into all of those things. So now I have this job, and it is July, I'll never forget, it was July 29, 2019 when I officially started. It was like my official first day, and I loved it. This job was amazing to me. I worked in Midtown Atlanta. I couldn't believe I was like a Midtown girl driving into Midtown every day. Like it just was everything. I loved my boss, my coworkers. We had so much fun. We used to walk to the park and have lunch. Like it was just an amazing job, right? And we were working, like we worked through lunch most of the time. Like we go pick up lunch and come back to our tables and work through lunch. But there was just so much, like, it was just amazing. I loved working with the talent. I love getting to know the talent. I love getting to work with the clients and getting to know everything. I was fully immersed. Like I didn't really get to tiptoe too much. I was like thrown in it in the best way and learned as I went. And I mentored under my boss, who was an industry veteran as well, or is an industry veteran, and just soaked it all in. I loved every second of it, and every now and then I would still do a job just to kind of make ends meet, or I would baby wrangle. If you don't know what that is, Google it. But I was like a child wrangler on set a lot, so there were a lot of times I was able to be on set and with talent and still in front of the camera, but most of my job was behind the scenes, and I really loved it. So, you know, I think my work ethic that I was speaking of earlier, that I learned just growing up, my first job, I would get off the bus and walk straight to work. And I've just always been a really hard worker, and there's quite literally nothing I can't do. And I'm saying that very confidently because I know it's true. There's literally nothing I cannot do if I want to do it. And so this was that for me. Like, I really wanted to do it, and I just went for it. And I just, you know, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I apologized for them, and I kept going. And I learned from every single mistake. Like, I never made the same mistake twice. You know what I mean? Like, it was one of those things where, like, you're like, okay, I learned that, moving on, make another mistake, learn that. And I became a fierce talent agent. So I went from a booker to a talent agent rather quickly. It's kind of an organic process. And I worked my tail off. Now, I want to say to you that if you have a talent agent, if you want a talent agent, if your kids have a talent agent, if you have any interaction with anyone in the industry, an agency owner, a manager, I don't care who it is, I want you to make sure that you express your gratitude, because this job, this field is 24/7, 365. There are no breaks, there are no vacations, there are no holidays. I can't tell you, I've worked through every holiday. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Thanksgiving. I would be at my daughter's cheerleading games in the stands with my laptop in my lap. I'd be in the carpool and picking her up on FaceTime on a call, like with my laptop in my lap. Worked with COVID, through COVID, like injuries, none of this matters, okay? Because the industry doesn't stop. Even when COVID was at its height and the world stopped, Georgia only stopped for like 3 weeks. So there was no like downtime. And even then, when we weren't booking people, we were doing in-house maintenance, right? Cleaning up our databases, like just all kind of stuff. The job is nonstop. And so I'm just saying that to you because you need to understand the amount of work that goes into it. And the amount of work that I was doing was insane. There were some weeks, you know, you had 30-hour weeks, other weeks you had 80-hour weeks. Some weeks I was working at 6 a.m., drive to work in the office, work through the office, go home, school, homework, you know, bath time, dinner time, all that stuff, put my daughter to bed and be working again all the way until like 2 o'clock in the morning. There are no limits because that's just the industry. And if you have a really good agent, you probably know that because you can email or text them at any point and they'll respond to you immediately. So I just want to say that because it's gonna matter in a minute. So, you know, I loved my job. There was no, I didn't think it was something I was going to be doing forever, but I did think it was at least a 5 to 8 year plan, right? Like, I'm like, okay, this is good. I like it here. I love it. I love my job. Everyone knew I loved my job. Everyone could see the growth and the change and the like fire in me about it. It was like a running joke in the office because I was dating my then boyfriend, who is now my husband, that like, well, you're never leaving, like, girl, you can't go, you're like, you can't leave, so what you gonna do, like, what's gonna happen if y'all get serious or y'all get married? And I was like, I don't know, he'll figure it out because I am not leaving. And at the time he lived in Florida, he was coaching down in Florida, so it was like we were in a long distance relationship, and everyone would be like, so what are you gonna do if y'all get serious? And then I got engaged and everybody's like, so what are you gonna do? And I'm like, I don't know, he'll figure it out. So that just goes to show you how much I loved this job. Like, it wasn't ever me like, oh, I gotta go to work. Like, I loved waking up on Mondays and going to work. We worked from home some days, we worked from the office. I loved going into the office and getting all cute and, you know, being that girl. I felt very empowered, very bossy, but very like, I was thriving and I was in my prime. Here's the word, flourishing. This was my word for like 3 years. I was flourishing and everyone around me could see it, right? Like, I just grew into my womanhood and it was a great season. It was a really great season. Boy, does God have a way of telling you what you thought was gonna happen ain't it, okay? I'm working. It's now like COVID has happened and I'm, you know, we're still going, we're still working. I started to feel a little kind of like, just a little, not a lot, but like, because I wasn't just an agent, right? Like, I'm a single mom, I'm dating a man who I can tell we're headed towards marriage. There's church, there's school, there's extracurricular activities, there's friends, there's functions, there's family, there's all these things that I was also doing on top of working this super demanding job. So I started to feel a little like, all right, you can do it, girl. Chugga, 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 like little engine that could. And then there just became a kind of mental switch for me, right? Like, things were changing. I was now engaged and starting to have more serious conversations about the future and, you know, just kind of like dealing and witnessing things that were teaching me lessons about myself and my self-worth and my integrity and my dignity and what that meant to me. And at the same time, all these things going on in the world, like these civil rights issues that are arising. And after George Floyd was murdered is where I felt like this shift of like something inside of me shifted, and I went from wanting to be this workhorse to like really starting to understand that like that is not why God put us on this earth. We were put on this earth to love, to share love, to help others, you know, to be a light in this world. And I'm like, a little part of me was like, what am I doing all this for, you know? And situations happen and you learn in those situations who you are because of how you approach them or arrive in those situations or how you handle them. And so I was really kind of slowly, very slowly starting to understand myself and come to some realizations. And you know, I think just really digging a little bit deeper. So let's fast forward to 2021. I have a new therapist who I love at the time, and she was really great for me. And I started to get in talks with my boss and her business partner about a promotion, and I knew it was coming, and I kind of like was really firm in what I wanted, because I felt like I had earned it and I really, really worked there. And they were like, yes, like you have earned it, and so let's do it. So the promotion to director of commercials and lifestyle print happened in April of 2021, and I was killing it. Like everyone was booking, everyone, like it just, I was killing it. Like I was killing it. I don't know what else to say. Like I got the promotion and I hit the ground running. I was like, I just dove into my new role with so much confidence and so much knowledge, and I was super, super excited about it. And then I, you know, started to share that online with people who were seeking information on how to do all these things. Now the top of 2022 is here, and the burnout has landed. The burnout is here. And I had a conversation with a friend who's also in the industry. He's in fashion, and he just understands kind of the demand, right? And he was like, you got to keep pushing, girl. Like, you're not done. You are not done. You got to keep pushing. And so I just kept that in my head. I'm like pushing myself now, which I've never felt like I had to push myself before to show up to work or to be positive and joyful about work. I was always grateful, because let me tell you one thing this job did for me. It allowed me to change my life and my daughter's life. And I shouldn't say the job, right? Like I did the work, but it positioned me to, like, I changed my life. I was able to pay off debt. I was able to just be a stable financial adult, and I've never had that in my life. I didn't grow up that way. Money has always been a struggle. Like I always correlated money and struggling, and so that is where I parented from. And so I was able to change that for myself and my daughter through this job. And I was starting to feel really burnt out and resentful and tired, run down. I was questioning my self-worth and my integrity in some situations, just wasn't my best self anymore. But I kept pushing. So spring comes around, and now it's kind of like, okay, I'm having a real deal conversation. We decided, my fiance and I decided, we're going to get married, and we're going to get married in the summer. And he lives in Florida because he coaches basketball in Florida. And so what does this mean? And so I'm praying at this. I'm in a season of complete and utter surrender to God. And I don't even know if it was by choice, but I just was on my knees because I didn't know what to do. And I was so anxious, and I was so worried, and it was all I could think about around the clock is like, what are we gonna do? What's the answer? And I would have all these conversations with my fiance, and then I go to my therapist, and she's like, okay, well, let's lay it out. Let's lay it all out and decide. And thank God for my therapist, because she really was such a vessel, and I was able to bounce things off of her. And ultimately, I knew that my season was coming to an end. And it is not because I was getting married. I want to be super clear about that. I don't think, even if I wasn't getting married, I think the season was coming to an end for me, because I just was losing the joy in the job. And, you know, everybody doesn't have the luxury to walk away because they're no longer happy in a job. I understand that. I worked my butt off because I didn't have a choice. I needed the job, but the season was changing. for me. And I had an opportunity to decide, am I going to stay in this job and kind of just do the job, or am I going to listen to God, take a leap of faith, and just go? And I mean, I tell y'all, I was praying, and things just started to happen where God was just dropping gems and confirmation and all of these things like God does. And I just slowly started to come meet God, meet him where he was at, because he was waiting for me, because he was always where he was at. He was just like, girl, come on over here and get the truth. Ultimately, I just decided, I knew that the right thing to do was to go ahead and transition out of this space. And so I did. I put in my official resignation and, you know, made it super clear that I was super grateful and I loved the time that I had. But I went to church, and I think this was the bomb that was dropped for me. And my pastor at the time, my church, shout out to Story Church in Atlanta, there was some stuff going on at the church, and the pastor was super transparent about it. And he said that in his situation, he told himself that he would stick around until his integrity was questioned. And he said, when you can no longer show up in a space with your integrity or your worth or your dignity intact, or your joy or your happiness or your passion and fervor intact, you can no longer occupy that space. And when I tell y'all, I wept like a baby, because you're like, God, give me a sign. God is throwing these signs at your face, like tripping you over these signs, and you're like, I need another sign. This was the sign. This was the one where God showed up and he was like, this is the time. This is the call. This is what you're going to do. So I did it. I took the leap of faith, not knowing what was about to happen and what I was doing next. And I resigned and got married and moved to Florida, and here we are now on my YouTube channel having a conversation about it. So now what, right? Now what do I do? I think that's what everyone's been like, so what are you up to now? Like, what are you doing? I took the entire summer off. I want to be super clear. I have never not had a job. I have never not worked my tail off for somebody else's business. And I was in this space to do so, and did. Okay? I went on my bachelorette trip. I went on a beautiful honeymoon to Greece. I was back and forth between Atlanta and Florida, enjoying my friends and my family. I did the beach a bunch. Like, I want to tell y'all, I lived my life this summer. I took the summer off. My daughter and I had so much fun, because she's so accustomed to being like, hold on, I'm working, be quiet, I'm working, give me a minute, I'm working, we can't do that, I'm working. And this summer, all I did was say yes. We did a whole bunch of fun nonsense. We had the best time, and I needed it. I needed to live, because again, that we are here not to work until we can retire. That's not our purpose, right? That's what this world has told us, but that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to live and enjoy each other, and I forget that sometimes. But this summer I lived intentionally in that. And so now I told myself, once the summer was over, once Carter got back in school, foot on the gas, we are going. So now what? We are here. We live in Florida. I am married, been married 3 months now, and I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I've had a couple nervous breakdowns. I've had some moments of like, what did you do? I went through an entire grieving process in making the decision to leave my job and move myself and my daughter. Went through an entire grieving process, grieving my entire life that I had built and worked so hard for, to just let it all go. And I did it. And to be on the other side of it is another thing, but I still have days where I'm like, it's hard, right? Like, I'm breaking down. I'm just like, what am I doing? What am I here for? What am I going to do? But the one thing I hold on to is grace, giving myself grace and time to figure that out, right? I've had all these years and all this time to figure out how to work for other people and work in these jobs and do all these things, but I've never done this before, and I need to remember that and give myself grace. And it's hard to remember that. It's hard to give yourself grace, but I implore you to on the days where you don't feel like doing anything, give yourself that grace. First of all, your bodies, our minds tell us these things when we need to slow down. So honor that, but also give yourself grace. Like, you know, there are days where I have 10 things on my checklist and I'm like, I gotta get them done. And there are days where I'm like, I just need to like chill out. So yeah, just remember to give yourself some grace and other people grace too, which is a huge thing I have to remind myself is like, while I'm trying to figure it out, so is everybody else, child. Another thing that I have come to realize in this new season is how hard it is sometimes to show up for yourself, right? Like, it's easy to show up to a job because you have a list of things to do. You have a boss or a superior to report to. You have a check to work for. But when you decide to step away from that and work for yourself, show up for yourself, it's hard. And no one is talking about that. No one is saying like, you know, it's like going off to college. You no longer have your mom beating on your door to get up. The bus ain't coming. Like, you just got to get up and do it for yourself. And sometimes that can be hard. It can be hard to find the motivation and the drive to do it. Which is so crazy because you're like, I have all this work ethic, or at least that's what I say. Like, I have all this work ethic. Why some days do I find it really hard? And I think there is some fear in the freedom, but there's also freedom in the freedom. So I just say all that to say, don't be afraid to show up for yourself. Don't be afraid. And I'm saying this to you, but this is what I have to say to myself. But give yourself some grace and show up for yourself. Stand up for yourself. Know your worth. That is probably the number one thing I walked away with from that time and that season of my life of being an agent, was I stepped into a really clear sense of who I was, what I wanted to stand for, what I wasn't going to stand for. And I have so much pride in that, and the strength it takes to walk away from something that, you know, from the outside looks so great and perfect and good. And there's a lot of strength though that it takes to walk away from something that you're not being hurt from, right? Like, I wasn't dying, and you know, I was making good money, and I had a really good job, and I walked away from it not knowing what was next, but knowing that God was going to provide. How am I working now? What am I doing for work? What am I doing for money? Is a few things. So we still are signed with that agency in Atlanta. So we still have representation in Atlanta. And we just recently signed with another agency here in Florida. Carter and I booked our first commercial, and we shoot it next week. Our fitting is actually on Friday. We are auditioning, and you know, so that's one way that we're still working. Or I'm still working. Carter does it, but you know, obviously for her it's a hobby. I am working as a creative director and designer on a couple of projects that I like feel like such a YouTuber right now. I can't talk about yet, but there's some things in the works, some projects that are developing that I'm giving my creative input in. If you follow me on social media, you see me do some brand collaborations. So I'm doing some of those, which has been really fun to dive into the creator space, the content creator space. But it's been such a blessing to have brands that want to work with me. And I did spend the summer kind of working with some brands for free because I wanted to start like getting practice and learning, and that was fun. So now I'm, you know, making some money from it, and it's a blessing. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing right now to just kind of start in this new journey of working for myself. So that's that. As far as the agent side of things, I know I still have people DMing me, messaging me, commenting on some of my YouTube videos, looking for answers. I don't have much left on my Instagram anymore. There are still videos on my TikTok, and here on YouTube there's a playlist called Industry Tea with B, where I share a lot of that information on how to get an agent, what agents are looking for, how to properly submit. If you have those questions, feel free to look at those previous videos. I also have a website that I have up now that I think I'm gonna start blogging on. I don't know, I've been like debating on it, but it kind of has all of my work on there, and I'm really proud of it because I did it all by myself. And I've worked with a designer on my branding, so I'm really just trying to build a brand at this point. And she is in incubation stage right now, but we are going to grow. and we're going to grow here on YouTube, and we're going to grow on other social media platforms, and we're going to grow in life, in love, in person, in marriage and parenthood and all those things. And I hope to build a community of people here who love to have fun, love family oriented content, love just all things me and this world that we live in. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's all I got. I hope to have answered some questions. I hope to have given some insight. I hope to have maybe inspired someone. I know they said we're in the Great Recession. I'm not trying to tell you go quit your job, but Beyonce did kind of write that song about me. You know what I'm saying? She definitely wrote Break Your Soul for me.
Because I just quit my job, I just fell in love. Gotta work too hard and make me so damn hard.
Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.